Ali, a 23-year-old living in an ordinary family in Tehran, never thought that this year's Christmas Eve would turn into a horrifying nightmare. He always celebrated this night with his family, but this year he had decided to go to a villa in the north with his friends. What awaited him was beyond any imagination. It was past midnight and heavy snow was falling. Ali and his 4 friends, Sarah, Mohammed, Nazanin, and Amir, had settled in an old, remote villa in the heart of Mazandaran's forests. The sound of wind blowing through the trees created an eerie atmosphere. Suddenly, a loud knock on the front door startled everyone. Ali hesitantly went to the door and opened it. To his surprise, an old man with torn and blood-stained clothes was standing behind the door. The old man's eyes had a strange glint, and he wore a scary smile. "Help, please help me," the old man said with a trembling voice. Ali and his friends, despite the fear in their hearts, invited the old man inside. But as soon as the old man entered, the power went out, and complete darkness engulfed everything. The sound of Nazanin's scream echoed in the darkness. When Ali managed to turn on his phone's flashlight, he was faced with a horrifying scene. Nazanin had disappeared, and only a trail of blood remained on the floor. Terrified, they all started searching for Nazanin. But the more they searched, the less they found. Strange sounds could be heard from around the villa. Demonic laughter, wolf howls, and blood-curdling screams. An hour later, Mohammed disappeared too. Ali, Sarah, and Amir, now terribly frightened, decided to flee the villa. But when they ran towards the car, they realized that the car tires had been punctured. At that moment, a demonic laugh came from behind them. When they turned around, they saw the old man, who now looked like a demonic creature. His eyes glowed red, and his teeth had become sharp and pointed. "You cannot escape," the old man said, in a voice that no longer resembled a human's. Ali and his friends ran in terror towards the forest. They could hear the footsteps of strange creatures behind them. The trees seemed to have come to life, trying to block their escape route. During the escape, Amir's foot got caught in a tree root and he fell to the ground. Before Ali and Sarah could help him, a black shadow engulfed him and disappeared. Now only Ali and Sarah were left. They ran tirelessly, but no matter how far they went, they seemed to be going in circles and returning to the starting point. Suddenly, Sarah shouted, "Ali, look!" Ali looked in the direction Sarah was pointing and saw something that froze the blood in his veins. Not far away, the bodies of Mohammed, Nazanin, and Amir were hanging from trees. Their eyes were open and staring at them. Sarah screamed and started running. Ali ran after her, but Sarah's scream suddenly stopped. When Ali looked back, Sarah had vanished. Now Ali was alone. Fear had consumed his entire being. He knew he had to find a way to escape, but he didn't know how. The sound of demonic laughter could be heard from every direction. Ali felt like he was going insane. He started running, not knowing where he was going. After hours of running, Ali found himself in front of a dark cave. Although he knew it might be dangerous, he felt that this cave was his only chance for salvation. With fear and trembling, he entered the cave. Complete darkness enveloped him. The sound of water dripping from the cave ceiling was the only sound breaking the deadly silence. Ali was taking slow, cautious steps. Suddenly, his foot hit something. When he bent down to see what it was, he realized with horror that it was a human skull. His heart was pounding. He wanted to turn back, but he knew that worse things were waiting for him outside the cave. As he went further, he heard whispers. The voices were getting louder every moment. Ali felt that the cave walls were closing in on him. Suddenly, he saw a light at the end of the cave. Hoping it might be an exit, he ran towards the light. But when he got there, he was faced with a scene that would haunt him for the rest of his life. In a large space, hundreds of people in black clothes were standing. In the center, the old man he had seen at the beginning was sitting on a throne, wearing a crown made of bones. The old man smiled upon seeing Ali and said, "Welcome, the last sacrifice." Ali wanted to run, but his feet were locked in place. He felt a force pulling him towards the crowd. A strange chant filled the air, and Ali felt like he was losing consciousness. When he opened his eyes, he found himself on a stone bed. The old man was standing above him, holding a dagger. "Now, you will become one of us," the old man said, and raised the dagger. Ali closed his eyes and waited for the end. But suddenly, a loud sound shook everything. A bright light filled the space, and Ali felt like he was falling. If you enjoyed it so far, please hit the subscribe button if you liked the video. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in his bed at home. Cold sweat covered his entire body. He was breathing heavily, and his heart was pounding. Was it all just a nightmare? Ali tried to calm himself down, but when he looked in the mirror, he saw something that froze the blood in his veins. On his neck, there was a fresh wound mark. Ali woke up with a start. This time he was really in his room. The clock showed 3 a.m. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. It was just a nightmare, he whispered to himself. But when he got up from the bed to drink some water, his eyes fell on something that made his heart stop. On the bedside table, there was an old dagger that he had never seen before. Ali picked up the dagger with the trembling hands. Something was engraved on its blade in an ancient language. He couldn't read it, but he felt he knew what it meant. "We will return." From that night on, Ali's life was never the same. Every night he woke up from terrible nightmares. On the street, he felt like shadows were following him. He heard voices that others couldn't hear. He tried to contact his friends, Sarah, Mohammed, Nazanin, and Amir, but none of them answered. When he went to their houses, their families said they had gone on a holiday trip, but Ali knew this wasn't true. A week later, Ali decided to go back to that villa in the north. He had to understand what had happened. With fear and trembling, he drove his car towards the Chalice Road. When he reached the villa, he was faced with a strange scene. The villa was completely intact, as if nothing had happened. There was no trace of blood or disorder. Ali hesitantly entered the villa. Everything was in its place. Even his friends' belongings were there, but there was no sign of them. Suddenly, a familiar laugh came from behind him. When he turned around, he saw the old man sitting on the couch, smiling. "Welcome back, dear Ali. We've been waiting for you." Ali felt his legs weaken. He wanted to run, but he couldn't. The old man stood up and came towards him. "You know you're very special. Among all your friends, only you were able to return." Ali asked with a trembling voice, "Where are my friends? What have you done to them?" The old man laughed and said, "They are now where they should be, and soon you will join them." Suddenly, the room door opened, and Sarah, Mohammed, Nazanin, and Amir entered. but something had changed in their faces. Their eyes were lifeless, and their smiles were scary. "My friends," Allie shouted, "what has happened to you?" Sarah, with a voice that seemed to come from the depths of a well, said, "We are now free, Allie. You can join us too." Allie felt the world spinning around him. He couldn't believe this was real. He tried to run towards the door, but his friends blocked his way. The old man took out a dagger from his pocket, the same dagger Allie had seen in his room. "It's time, Allie. It's time for you to become one of us." Ali screamed with all his might and tried to find a way to escape. In a moment, his eyes fell on the window. Without thinking, he ran towards the window and threw himself out. A severe pain shot through his entire body. When he opened his eyes, he found himself on the cold, snow-covered ground. Angry shouts could be heard from inside the villa. Despite the severe pain, Ali got up and started running. He didn't know where he was going, he just knew he had to get away from there. He ran for hours in the forest until he finally reached a road. A car passing by stopped upon seeing Ali's disheveled state. The driver, a middle-aged man, asked with concern, "Are you all right, son?" "What happened?" Ali didn't know what to say. How could he explain what he had seen? He just said, please take me away from here." The man got him into the car and drove towards the city. Along the way, Ali tried to understand what had happened. Was all of this real, or just a long and horrible nightmare? When they reached the city, Ali thanked the man and got out. He went straight home and locked himself in his room. Days passed, and Ali didn't come out of his room. His family was worried, but he couldn't explain to them what he had seen. Weeks later, Ali finally decided to return to normal life. But every night, he had nightmares of that terrible night. On the street, his heart trembled with fear at the sight of every old man he saw. One day, as he was walking in the park, he caught sight of a group of young people laughing and joking. For a moment, he thought he saw Sarah, Mohammed, Nazanin, and Amir. But when he got closer, he realized they were just ordinary strangers. Ali realized that he might never understand the truth of that night. Were all those events real, or just a product of his sick mind? He decided to stop thinking about it and try to rebuild his life. But every year, on Christmas Eve, Ali locks the door, draws the curtains, and waits for the night to end, because he knows that in the darkness, there are things waiting to pull him into their world. And every time he sees the old dagger in his desk drawer, he remembers that maybe one day they will return